Welcome back to Racing Rundown. On today's video, we are going to be previewing the Grade 1 Cotillion, the second of a few previews we're going to have this week on Racing Rundown. We already have a Pennsylvania Derby preview out. Eric did that. A link below will be in the description, so you can check that out after you are done with this video. There may also be some further previews later on in the week, still to be determined at this point. But we're going to be talking about the Grade 1 Cotillion for 3-year-old fillies. There will be timestamps below in the description for this video for your viewing pleasure as well, and we're going to get into this race now. 9 fillies, and we're going to start off with the number 1 horse. That is Green Up for Todd Pletcher. One of 3 that Todd Pletcher has in this race, and maybe the most intriguing of the 3 Pletcher fillies in this race. She won the local prep, the Catherine Sophia, last time out. 2 back, won the Bowling Springs at Monmouth. So a couple of times she's won black type races. Not quite graded stakes level yet, but she's been improving her last couple of races on all metrics. She has improved in her last 2 starts, and stepping up to graded stakes company, that's definitely not a bad thing to see. And then the other thing about Green Up that is certainly a very positive thing for her is she showed a new element last time in that Catherine Sophia. Prior to the Catherine Sophia, she had been primarily a horse who was doing most of her running toward the front end. That changed in the Catherine Sophia, and then throughout the first half mile, 5/8 of the race, she was toward the back of the field. And this is a race, the Cotillion, where there's going to be a fair amount of speed. I'm going to get into that, but to do her running from that part of the track in the race, or in the Catherine Sophia last time, certainly a very good thing to see in a race where there is going to be a fair amount of speed, and I would very much advise, if you're playing this race, to look off speed in here. So improving at the right time, a little bit light on class, and that's ultimately the reason why I don't like her as much as I like other horses in here, but improving at the right time. She retains Irad Ortiz for this race, so that's never a bad thing. Certainly not without a chance, and certainly one that I think is worth a look at, maybe even a use underneath. We'll get into my picks for this later, but definitely one that I have to consider to use underneath. We're going to move on now to the number 2 horse in this race, and that is Adare Manor, a horse that I have been on both ends of the extreme with throughout this year. Go back to March and April, I thought Adare Manor was the best 3-year-old filly in the country. But post Santa Anita Oaks, my opinion was definitely changed about Adare Manor. Now, go back to February. Adare Manor won the Las Virgenes by 13 lengths. It was a very impressive visual race, I should say. And I don't blame anyone, including myself, for thinking that she was top class in terms of the 3-year-old fillies at that point. However, she did not beat a soul in that race, and the record of the horses coming back out of that race has been atrocious. Only one of the 3 horses has won, and that is a 1-race win, and that was a turf race. So that was a fake race, as was the same case with the Bob Lewis and Messier. Adare Manor's Las Virgenes was even more fake than Messier's was. And then that was kind of showed in the Santa Anita Oaks when she had to chase Ain't Easy, and she got beat by Desert Dawn in that race. And then subsequently, she lost to Black Eyed Susan, and that was a very interesting race the way that it was run. She sat 3rd the entire race, and it wasn't a merry-go-round because Beguine, who was the front runner, backed out. But if you remember Preakness weekend, the track was a conveyor belt with how speed was holding up there. So Interstate Daydream, who was 2nd the whole time, and then inherited the lead after Beguine dropped out of it, ended up going on to win the race by a length. Adare Manor did close it up. Interstate Daydream was in front by 2 lengths, and the margin was just over 1 length, and she did get into 2nd. She was in 3rd throughout the majority of the race, but still not good enough to get the job done there. And that's the big issue that I have with Adare Manor, is on 2 occasions she's been beaten by a better horse. Her one good victory was a fake race, and she's also off a 4-month layoff. And if you know me, you know I don't like horses off of layoffs to begin with, and especially a horse with as suspect talent as Adare Manor is. I think that she's got some kind of talent, but at the end of the day, Adare Manor is really unproven to this point, because she can definitely place in a graded stakes race, but can she win a graded stakes race? At this point, I'd say no, because it hasn't been borne out to this point. beaten by Desert Dawn, beaten by Interstate Daydream. I don't really see a reason why that's going to change in this race, and I'm willing to take my stand with that. And definitely as someone who has been very wrong, and I will admit it on Adare Manor, I'm taking my stand against her in this spot. We're going to move on now to the number 3 horse in this race, and that's Goddess of Fire, another horse that I think is very critical to this race in terms of looking underneath here. I don't think Goddess of Fire is a win candidate in this race, and I'll tell you the reason why. Kentucky Oaks. That was when she went up against top-class horses, Nest, Secret Oath, Desert Dawn, Echo Zulu. She was very much well beaten in that spot. And I've never been the biggest fan of Goddess of Fire from a win standpoint, but we do have to give her a bit of a break there because the Kentucky Oaks was certainly a very tough race. And outside of that, she has been a consistency specialist throughout the entire point of this year. Now, go back to the one race in her career outside of the Kentucky Oaks that she's missed the board in. That was the very loaded Tempted Stakes, in which was won by Gerrymander, who's also in this race. Magic Circle, who was a stakes winner and placed in multiple graded stakes races throughout her career. Nest, obviously you may have heard of her before. And then Sweetest Pie, who was also an interesting quality runner at her best point. So Goddess of Fire was in a very tough Tempted Stakes. And then outside of that, 3 second-place finishes in 3 stakes this year. Before the Kentucky Oaks, she was second in the Wilton, which was a mile out of the new mile chute at Saratoga, and then third in the Alabama. As I said, this is a race where there's plenty of speed in here, and Goddess of Fire has shown the ability to be able to hit the board in these kind of races. And I like horses that can hit the board consistently in races where there's a lot of speed signed on. So I think Goddess of Fire, same thing as with her stablemate Green Up, is certainly very much worth a look underneath here. The one thing that might soften me on that is she is the 3rd choice on the morning line. I'm not sure how much she's going to get played. I'm not going to try to speculate that, but it might be a game time decision as to which one you use when you look at her versus her stablemate, if you're just looking at it from a price perspective. But if you're completely ignoring the price, there's plenty of reasons to go with Goddess of Fire because of all the consistency that she's shown throughout her career. We're going to move on now to the number 4 horse in this race. A pretty easy pass here, and that is Beach Daze, the longest shot on the board in this race or in the morning line. And, I say pretty easy pass, but, this is a filly who has won 2 of the last 2 of the last races that she's finished and was second in a stakes race at Parks back in March. So, she doesn't have the worst form overall for the longest shot in this race, but definitely very light on class. She lost to Morning Matcha in that mainline stakes, which was her one start in stakes company that was a black type, but definitely very light on class here. And with as many good fillies as show up here, that's definitely the deciding factor. But, you say longest shot in the board, it's not the most... It's not the most disrespectful thing for Beach Daze, for lack of a better term, in this race, because she is a talented horse, but just probably in 2 over her head in this spot. We'll move on now to the number 5 horse in this race, and that is Gerrymander. For Chad Brown, a horse who I have been very high on. I haven't gotten much to say on her, or much time to say positive things about her on Racing Rundown, but internally I've been very high on her. We didn't do the Mother Goose on Racing Rundown, but I had her in the Mother Goose. I thought that she had a huge chance to win the 8 Bells, and really, this is how I would classify her year so far. The 8 Bells, Chad Brown is very iffy off a layoff. Some of his horses can do it, some of his horses can't do it. You saw it Kentucky Oaks / Derby weekend. Jack Christopher, who ran on the same car or the same weekend last year as Gerrymander did. Jack Christopher had no problem. Gerrymander clearly did have a problem. Next start out, second start back off the layoff, she won the Mother Goose in a very strong fashion. Then last time out in the Alabama, obviously she was never going to beat Nest. Indications have always been that maybe she was a horse that could get a little bit further, because even though she isn't into mischief, she is out of the mare who produced Lone Rock, who was the whatever they call the Breeders' Cup Marathon nowadays. Her dam produced Lone Rock, who was the winner of that race last year. So indications were that she could get the distance to a certain point. Clearly didn't happen there, but I think she's worth a look at in this race because she has plenty of talent. And obviously, as a stakes winner, she beat Nest. Nest was certainly not in her element there, but stakes winner in the Tempted, She was never going to beat Echo Zulu, but she ran a fine race behind Echo Zulu in the Frizette, and I really liked her Mother Goose win. Now, did she beat a whole lot in the Mother Goose? Not really, but Shahama did come back to win the Monmouth Oaks, and we'll get to Shahama in a couple of minutes, but, you know, some quality there, and then, you know, I think the Alabama may have just been a little bit too far for her. So, certainly a horse that I think is worth consideration here. You're getting a very fair price on her, at least in terms of the morning line. 8-1. I don't know if that's going to come down, but it's a very fair price for a horse that is a stakes winner and definitely has the potential to place in this race. I also don't know. She's one that has shown speed in the past. I'm not sure that she's going to be forwardly placed because she can be a little bit adaptable, but, you know, we'll see what happens with her. I'm a little bit softer on her than I would have been if she had run a little bit better in the Alabama, but not without a chance to, at the minimum, run a very strong placing in this race. We're going to move on now to the morning line favorite for this race, and that is Secret Oath, the Kentucky Oaks winner. Last two races, she was just running into the better horse. And Racing Rundown has said since the Kentucky Oaks, myself and Eric, that Nest was the better of the two in the Kentucky Oaks. She just got a very poor ride in terms of the way that the race ended up playing out there. And I'm not going to get into that further because I don't need to relitigate the Kentucky Oaks. But Secret Oath, last two races, was clearly inferior to Nest. Now, the big positive with Secret Oath here is there is no Nest here. So conventional wisdom says the better horse is not here. Secret Oath is the horse you got to go with here. That's what conventional wisdom says. Another point in Secret Oath's corner, as I've been mentioning, we'll get to it more as we get up to the two of the last three horses. I think that there is a good amount of speed signed on in this race. So that certainly benefits Secret Oath, who is a closer. And I think, you know, I don't want to get too caught up in reading into the coaching club in the Alabama. And some people might be worried that, you know, Dwayne Lucas does have a reputation of running horses into the ground and, getting too many races into them and they get tired toward the end of the year. And I can understand why someone might be concerned about that with her losing both the coaching club and the Alabama to a horse that she handled in the Kentucky Oaks. But at the same time, Nest has just progressed so much since the Kentucky Oaks. I really don't think that it matters. I think that Secret Oath is a fine 3-year-old filly. She doesn't have to go up against Nest here, and she also has the race set up the way that she would need it to in order to run her A race here. So I think that she's the clear win pick in this race. I'm not going to mess around. I'm going to take her here. It's not fun to pick the favorite, but at the end of the day, I'm not really going to try to complicate things here because I think Secret Oath is just plenty good to win this race. We're going to move on now to the number 7 horse, and that is Shahama, the third and final of the 3 horses for Todd Pletcher in this race. And Shahama is another one of those speed types in this race. Last time out, she won the Monmouth Oaks, sitting off of the pace, but she was within a half length of Juju's map throughout the majority of that race. Going back to her prior 2 starts before that, she was second in the Mother Goose, and then she was 6th in the Kentucky Oaks, and those were her 3 starts in the United States, and she won the UAE 1,000 Guineas and the UAE Oaks. Both of those races in very impressive fashion. She's kind of been a mystery horse ever since she came over here. Very difficult to gauge how good she really was because she wasn't really beating anybody in the UAE when she was running in the Guineas and the Oaks over there. But she has given a good account of herself since then. A good run in the Kentucky Oaks off of a 2.5-month layoff there, and then solid runs in the Mother Goose, and then obviously a nice stakes win last time out in the Monmouth Oaks. Problem with her is she's speed, and I'm staying away from, or she's going to be forwardly placed here. I'm staying away from forwardly placed horses, so I got to stay away from Shahama in this race. We're going to move on now to the number 8 horse in this race, and that is Morning Matcha, another horse who I think is, if you want to get creative in this race, I think this is the horse that you're going to have the best chance to get creative with here. Third in the local prep to Catherine Sophia, third in the Delaware Oaks. Those are her highlights in Stakes Company. Not the greatest look for Morning Matcha, but she is a dead closer in this race. And if this race does have the amount of speed signed on early on in this race that I think it might, then Morning Matcha certainly has a chance to run a very solid race in here. I don't think she's a win candidate, but at a big price, and I love these horses that are big price to throw show wagers on because you get paid if, horses that are double digits on the board and high double digits, 15 to 1, I wouldn't say that it's impossible that she could be higher than this 15 to 1 point. When those horses hit, you get paid you get paid a good amount. So I think it's certainly worth a shot with Morning Matcha if you're trying to get super creative in this race. I'm not necessarily going to go that route, but that's what I would tell you about Morning Matcha, is if you want to get crazy in this race and you think, like me, that there's going to be plenty of speed in here and they could blow it up, Morning Matcha certainly makes sense in this race. We're going to move on now to the number 9 horse in this race, the last one that we're going to talk about, and that horse is Society, who is coming out of a good win last time out in the Monmouth, not in the Monmouth Oaks, in the Charlestown Oaks. And before that, if you remember back to when we did the preview for the coaching club, I thought that she had a chance to run well in the coaching club because I thought she was going to trip out in there. Now, she didn't break, and when she didn't break, her race was over in there, but the point was solid, the point was valid going into that race. And then subsequently, she backed it up with a really strong win in the Charlestown Oaks. Problem is, I think she is going to be the front runner in this race. And as I've said, I'm staying away from horses that are on the lead in this race. There's 4 of them, and I'll get into them when I get to my picks, but there's 4 of them that I think are going to be up there, and I think that she's going to be the leader of those 4. So I got to stay away from her in this race, just because I don't think that it's going to, I don't think that being on the lead is going to be the place you want to be in this race. We're going to move on now to my picks in this race, and I got to get into those 4 horses. Now, I alluded to it with, obviously threw it out there with Adare Manor, Shahama, and Society. I did forget to mention it with Beach Daze. That's the 4th horse that I think is going to be up in that early mix, and I think that could set it up well for your Goddess of Fires, your Secret Oaths, and then if we're getting even crazier, your Morning Matchas. I'm not sure where Green Up is going to be. She could potentially be in front of those 3 that I just already mentioned, but I think given that last effort in the Catherine Sophia, I think it's worth betting that Green Up is not going to be up there. If she wants to make it a 5, then that makes it even better for Secret Oath, Morning Matcha, Goddess of Fire. So, as I said, in this race, I'm going to go with Secret Oath. I don't think that there's a reason to not pick Secret Oath in this race. I'm going to let her lose this race before I am willing to take against her in a start where she's not going up against Nest or top caliber older fillies. Underneath, as I said, I'll give out the 2 Pletcher fillies, Green Up and Goddess of Fire. Want to stay away from horses on the lead. I'm not sure what kind of a price we're going to get. I don't think it's going to be super crazy with Green Up or Goddess of Fire. But, if we get 6, 7 to 1 on one of those 2 fillies, or, 6 and 7 on Goddess of Fire and Green Up, and one of them runs a solid show effort, I think that's, we're doing pretty well for ourselves if we get Secret Oath home in this race. So that's how I'm going to play the Cotillion with Secret Oath, with the 2 Pletcher fillies that I mentioned. As I talked about in the opening of this, we do have a preview for the Pennsylvania Derby. There will be a link to that below in the description. Eric did that, and then we're also going to have stuff further on this week, and definitely be sure to check out episode 177 of Racing Rundown, where we will be previewing all of these races upcoming this weekend. We'll see you for that. Have a good one.